Hi, I'm Emily from LifeSewSavory.com, a sewing community where I show my latest projects and tutorials. And today I'm going to be sharing a legging pattern which is available for download on the website. You can find it there, and it's in sizes 18 months through 12 years, so you can clothe a variety of size girls with this easy legging pattern. And I'm just going to use this pattern to demonstrate a couple of different sewing techniques that I like to use. So before we get into that, let me show you a couple of ones that I've already made. This one was sewn entirely without a serger. So if you don't have a serger, you can just use a zigzag or a stretch stitch to still make up a very cute pair of leggings. This one was very similar to what we're going to sew today with cuffs. And personally, I like to add cuffs on the bottom of my leggings so I don't have to hem the teeny tiny bottom of little girls' clothes. And then this one is a pattern hack that you can easily do, which is to add a circle skirt directly to the leggings and make an entire little bottoms outfit right there. And then these I did use a cover stitch to hem, but again, it's kind of tiny to get in there, so I prefer to use the cuff when I can. All right, so let's talk about the cuff. To add a cuff to any stretch pant pattern, all you're gonna do is make it double wide of what you want, fold it in half, and then simply pin it along the bottom. If you want it to be a tight cuff, then you could cut it a little bit shorter than the bottom of your pants and stretch it to fit over. So we'll sew that on, and I'll just show you how easily that cuff goes on. Now these leggings, I have already sewn the back and the front, and then we have the legs left and right here. So I'm going to show you the cuffs, and then I'm also going to show you a really easy waistband that I love to do, and that's this one, which you actually don't make a casing. You sew the elastic directly onto the fabric, fold it over, top stitch, and you have a finished waistband. If you prefer, you can always do the elastic casing where you fold over your waistband, stitch it first, like I did on this. This is the shorts version, perfect for wearing underskirts in the summer or dresses so you don't get into any situations. So then you would cut your elastic the right size and, like the traditional method, thread that elastic right through the casing, close it, and go through there. So you can do the casing method on there. That's very simple to do. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head over to the sewing machines, and I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques that you can use with the cuffs and to sew the elastic directly onto the tops of the leggings. So let's start with the serger. I just have your normal serger settings that you would use for knit fabric, and I've pinned the cuff to the bottom of the fabric, of the one leg. We're just going to stitch right across. I'm trimming a very narrow seam allowance off the bottom of the pants. But you can see how now we have a really cute bottom on the edge, and once this is folded and you sew up the leg, then that'll be the bottom of the legging, and you have a perfect edge without having to do a hem. I don't top stitch along here, but if you wanted to, you could top stitch that seam. And I'm just going to really quickly sew on the other one while we're here. So take the second cuff, line it up along the edge, and then we're going to stitch it right along that fabric. And I am not stretching this as I sew it. The cuff is the same width as the fabric. If you want an extra tight bottom, you would stretch the cuff and then make it smaller than the pants so that it's nice and tight. I've marked my elastic at the halves. So here's where I sewed it into a circle after measuring the correct distance that I want it to be. So I've just used a zigzag to overlap that for a nice flat seam. Now I'm going to match that up with one of the seams. I like to use the back seam of the leggings and pin this here. Then I have the other part of the elastic already marked, and I'm going to pin that on the front seam. Now you could add more pins, but personally I just kind of like to stretch and sew it as I go. But if you feel like this is too scary for you, you can go ahead and add a couple more pins along that line, and that will just give you a little more direction as you sew. But I'm gonna start in the back, and I'm going to line up the top of the elastic with the top of the pants. And I don't want to trim much of the fabric off, but if you trim a little fabric, that's okay. The one thing you want to do is not cut the elastic with the blade of the serger, because then that will cause the elastic to start fraying. So just watch that when you're sewing. It's okay if you trim the fabric, not okay if you trim the elastic, but you do want to make sure that you catch the elastic in the serger stitch so that it's attached to the pants. So as we sew, we're going to be stretching the elastic, but not stretching the fabric. Just going around, trimming a little bit of that fabric off, but trying not to trim the actual elastic. And what we're doing here is we're actually attaching the elastic right to the pants so that we don't have to create a casing. And this, when I'm actually sewing for my daughter, who needs like 10 pairs of leggings because she goes through them, this is a way that I can make leggings from start to finish in maybe 10 minutes, and then I can actually crank out a bunch of leggings and not have to worry about it for a few months. So just a quick time-saving tip, and I think the finished product looks just as nice as if I had created a casing. So now you can see that my elastic is sewn right on the top of the pants. Okay, and you'll want to double check that you've caught the elastic and the pants in all the places that you should, and you don't have any holes along there. And we're going to just go over to the sewing machine here, and you're going to want to make sure that you have a stretch needle on your sewing machine, a knit needle or a stretch needle, and then you also are going to use either a stretch stitch or a zigzag, a narrow zigzag, to fold this over. If you have a cover stitch, you could totally use it for this as well. And I like to stitch on the front of the fabric so that I can make sure my stitches are nice and even and look pretty on the outside. So all you're going to do is fold that elastic over to fully enclose it. So you see we now have like an elastic casing that we've created. And I'm going to start on that back seam and then put the presser foot down, and as I sew, I'm going to fold that elastic under, stretch it just a tiny bit so that I don't have ripples in my fabric, and then stitch along. And again, I'm using a stretch stitch, which is just like a really narrow zigzag. And I like to put one hand on the back and one hand on the front so that I can make sure I'm pulling it through with even tension. And where you're sewing on this is right along the bottom of the elastic where you folded it over. So in a sense, we're creating the casing as we're sewing right along. And don't be afraid to stop and start as much as you need to get things lined up and all laid in the right place. So we're halfway around, and just making sure my fabric is laying. I've tried pinning it first, but I find I end up with so many adjustments that it's not really worth doing that, because I end up taking out the pins and readjusting my fabric. So I just kind of like to stop and start and keep sewing around as I'm going, and we're almost back around to where we started. And then I'll show you our nice finished waistband. Again, I'm putting just gentle tension on the back with my left hand, just to keep it moving through. With the elastic in there and the fabric, sometimes it doesn't want to keep moving. All right, so now we have our leggings with the elastic enclosed and a ready-made elastic casing, and then all you would do is just sew up the inseam and you'd have a finished pair of leggings.